Oh, Brad, what have you done now?
Doc! Okay, relax, Doc. It's me. It's Martin.
Oh, it can't be. Just sent you back to the future.
Yeah. Oh, I know you did send me back to the future, but I'm back. I'm back from the future.
Great Scott.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
The way I see it, if you're gonna build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
Whoa, this is heavy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Back to the Future, the podcast, the only podcast looking back in time at the greatest film trilogy of all time, Back to the Future. I'm your friend in time, Brad Gilmore, and we are back with another show. What did y'all think of last week? It's pretty cool, wasn't it? Wasn't it? It was Future Day last week, and we kicked off with a special two-part Future Day edition of Back to the Future, the podcast, to kick off Season 7. Not only did I play a clip of my conversation with the one and only Christopher Lloyd. Can I get a great Scott?
Great Scott!
Right? Not only did I do that, you got to hear from a lot of celebrities whom I've spoken with over the last several weeks where the Back to the Future came up, or maybe something about my book came up. And then in part 2 of my Future Day special, you got to hear from the man himself, the creator, the inventor, the executive producer, Bob Gale. Bob Gale joined us on the air over there on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 here in Houston, Texas. And also, we got to talk to him here on Back to the Future, the podcast. I hope you enjoyed that interview, man. It was one of those, like I said last week, you know, that one was a special one. To be able to talk to him was massively special. And I still have my guest list, my wish list of people, and some of those are being worked on in the works, so keep your fingers crossed for me. This week on the podcast, I have Peter Rosenberg. You might know Peter Rosenberg for his own ESPN radio show, The Michael K. Show, over there in NYC. You might know him from being a part of the morning show for, has to be at least near a decade or more, over there on Hot 97 with Laura Stiles and Ebro in the morning. You might know him from there, or you might know him from the WWE, where he hosts the kickoff shows, and he had a show on the WWE network called Bring It to the Table. He's been everywhere, and I've been a fan of Peter Rosenberg for a while. I remember first discovering him on YouTube from the Hot 97 clips. I'm a big hip-hop fan, and to see him on there and giving his opinion, always emphatic about his choices, it was pretty cool, and we got to know each other. I actually met him in Austin, Texas at South by Southwest one year, and somehow or another, we kind of stayed connected, and then he came on the radio show a few times with Booker T and myself, and then when he started working with Booker, I think we got a little bit cooler yet again, or we got to know each other a little bit more, I should say. And he, during pandemic times in New York, visited a drive-in where he got to watch Back to the Future, and he DM'd me on Instagram, was like, hey man, I just noticed a whole bunch of things about Back to the Future I didn't know before, and he said would love to come on the podcast. And if someone wants to come on Back to the Future, the podcast, talk Back to the Future, guess what? You're going to come on Back to the Future, the podcast, especially if you're Peter Rosenberg, sweet Peter Rosenberg, or Rosie, as Booker T calls him. So Peter and I talk about his love for the movies, what he noticed in his most recent viewing of Back to the Future in the drive-ins, and really talks about that drive-in experience. We also try to hypothesize and theorize what hip-hop personalities would work well in Back to the Future, and what professional wrestlers would work well in the Back to the Future universe. Here it is. This is my conversation with Hot 97, ESPN, and WWE's own Peter Rosenberg on Back to the Future, the podcast. And he joins me now on the podcast, man. It's a guy who I've talked a lot about wrestling with, some hip-hop conversations, but he's Hot 97 and ESPN Radio's Peter Rosenberg. What's going on, Peter?
How you doing, Brad?
I'm good, man. I'm glad that we got to do this because you're a big Back to the Future fan. Obviously, I am as well, but we've never really discussed it at length, a tweet here or there. But I will say this. Before the world shut down, I saw you on my last trip that I took, and that was in Las Vegas, Nevada. Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, the fight of the century. And we were sitting pretty close to each other, but there was a moment that popped both you and I, and that's when Michael J. Fox was shown on the big screen. I was like, Marty McFly's in the building. It's a legendary moment. And I saw you pop for it too. So have you always been a big Michael J. Fox fan, or Back to the Future? Like, how did it start off for you?
I can't recall what comes first, my like big Back to the Future fandom or him on Family Ties. I'm not sure, but in that moment, that was a really fun moment. It's the last fun thing I did really before the world ended, like really, really fun thing. Right. So it's weird to think about like a weekend of going to dinners with my co-host Laura. We were like in Vegas having a great time. And yeah, I was actually as tipsy as I get. Basically at that fight. Like I was in a great mood. And it was back to back. Like Tyson was there, Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
And then they show Michael J. Fox. And I just remember thinking or saying that Michael J. Fox is one of the few people that if I see him, because of how much I love his characters, particularly Marty McFly, I just like don't know that I could keep it fully together. Like he's on that list. Of people that I'm like, oh my, like, you know, and he still looks great and still feels like Marty to some degree. And so, but I don't remember. It's all that sort of blends together in the 80s for me. I don't really have a stronghold on me deciding that like this is one of my all-time favorite movies until the trilogy came out on DVD. Maybe it was 2000, maybe it was the 15th anniversary.
Yeah.
And they put out like a box set. And that when like I ran out and bought it, and that was when it kind of dawned on me that like, oh, this is like just about my favorite movie. So it's kind of over the last 20 years that maybe I've heralded it more as opposed to when, because I'm older than you. Mm-hmm. So as opposed to when I was little, where it was such a part of it's everyone's favorite movie, you know?
Right.
It's not until a little more time passes that it feels a little more unique to really be like hardcore into it.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand where you're coming from. To me, that was how, after I watched them on Disney Channel for the first time, I got the box set, and that was really what did it for me. So you're saying it's your favorite movie, period, bar none.
So I that's over the last few years. I just realized it's my favorite movie. It wasn't like this like really conscious decision. It was just like when I think about if someone says, what's your favorite movie? I have all these things I love, but the only thing that I will rewatch forever and ever and ever and still like run through the gamut of emotions is Back to the Future. So I was like, why? No, that's my favorite movie. Like it kind of took me time to realize it, because to me, it's always such a hard question. You have different movies you're obsessed with in different times of your life. But it's my number one.
So you said recently when we were talking on Instagram, you said that you went to the drive-in, right, and got to see it for the first time, in that kind of scenario, that setting. You said you noticed a couple things. So first, I want to say, what was it like experiencing it in that drive-in setting? And then two, what did you notice that stood out to you as it's your favorite movie and there's something new that stuck out?
So it was, it was perfect for that setting. I've seen 3 movies. There's a great drive-in here called Skyline in Brooklyn, and it's incredible. Like the setup is great. It's not ragtag. Like this is going to be their business for a long time. Like they bought in, and their location is of literally as good a view of Manhattan, as unobstructed a view of Manhattan as could exist. Like you are just on the East River looking at Manhattan. So when you're watching the movie, you have the entire New York skyline behind the theater. It's just pretty unbeatable. And then like it's packed. So many cars are there. The audio's on the radios is on a radio station frequency, which for me is also a radio geek. I pop for that. Like there's so many things that make it awesome. But like I've seen 3 movies there. I saw Grease, which I'd actually never seen in full, which is crazy for a 41-year-old man, but I had not.
I feel like it's a prerequisite at some point in life that you have to experience like, John Travolta.
And it kind of spoke to how iconic that movie is in the sense that I knew almost every scene and had never recalled seeing the whole movie.
Yeah.
Like that's how transcendent that movie is. And I went to see Back to the Future, which was a gimme. And then I saw Jaws. So like all movies that I thought really fit the vibe of that experience of a drive-in. Sadly, I missed Back to the Future 2. I was traveling for work and missed when they showed Back to the Future 2. But so the other part of your question, the part that I noticed, and now I'm forgetting the exact verbiage that you'll probably remember.
Yeah.
But there's a moment towards the end of the movie, I believe it's when Doc runs into Doc.
Okay, that's in 2.
No, wait, hold on. Is the only scene where because there's only one Doc in one.
Right.
So it's when Doc's talking to Marty. It's not it's the same location.
Right.
But it's when Doc's talking to Marty by the car as they're setting up at the end. And there's a mention of about how it could have how one thing can affect everybody. And it dawned, and Doc gives a look. Doc has this moment where he looks up and acknowledges sort of in that moment was the first time I realized that they're acknowledging how Marty's dad will be different because of what just happened.
Right.
There's an acknowledgement that when he says it worked, everything worked to plan. And when they have the realization that everything worked to plan, he knocked out Biff, everything. Doc has, I forget what the
it was, he never stood up to Biff in his whole life. And Doc goes, never? And then, and Marty's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, never mind that. Never mind that.
It's the look. It's the look. And thank you. I knew I didn't have to remember it because you have it just right. He gives a look up at the idea of never. And I guess, and what makes the movie so great is that every time I watch it, I think about something different. And I had been thinking about, particularly in this last viewing of it, how Marty's dad, how George is how he changes at the end. And yes, it's a cute, funny thing at the end of the movie. It kind of ties a nice bow on it, but it's more than that. Like that is in a lot of ways what the entire movie is about. And so when Doc has that little acknowledgement of never, it really makes you realize like, oh, that knockout punch changed history.
Changed
and
everything.
I never noticed Doc's little nod there at all.
I mean, that's what's great about the film is you can watch. I still watch. I've seen it dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times, obviously. And I still will find something small. Like I was watching Back to the Future 2 the other day, and he's going to the antique shop in 2015, and he looks through the window, and there's like a Roger Rabbit doll. I know it's like a small, tiny thing, but it's like, oh, Robert Zemeckis, Christopher Lloyd. There's like small nods everywhere. For you, though, you said you missed out on 2 and 3. Are you as big a fan of the sequels as you are the first one? Because what I find with a lot of people who grew up with that 85 Back to the Future, they're like, yeah, the sequels are all right, but this is the one that I like. Are you a fan of the entire trilogy?
So the reason I just actually mixed those things up is I was hanging out with someone and she had seen them, but like it wasn't a part of her life.
Right.
So I was like, you need to let's rewatch here and watch 2 also. And so I just watched them all over the course of a week. And I was curious to watch 3 again because I'd only seen 3 a couple of times. And it was widely completely written off by people. They filmed it at the same time as 2. It was kind of a rush job. It got silly. And then recently I'd run into a couple of people who were like, yo, people sleep on 3. 3 is really good. In my rewatching of them all, to me, it still stayed the same. 1 is like the greatest movie ever made.
Yeah.
2 is a really good, like, solid movie, not a crappy sequel, like a really good movie where they tap back in beautifully to all the themes and just geek you out with so much fun futuristic stuff. And 3, I sort of disagreed with the people who told me, like, nah, 3 was just as good. Like, 3 to me is still a full level down from 1 and 2. It has things I like about it, but maybe it's because I watch them in such close proximity, and I'm inherently more into the idea of futuristic stuff than Western stuff.
Right.
That I pop more. You know, maybe it's like the Doc love story is cute, but I don't know if it's enough to drive like the entire film for me to some degree. But I think 2 is an iconic film also. And to your point that you made about Roger Rabbit, what I noticed about 2 so much was Michael Jackson. Like, man,
Beat
there's
It
like
plan.
There's 2 or and then when he goes back to his old house, which is now not his house anymore, and it's a black family that lives there, and the whole neighborhood's different, whatever. The girl's room who he's in, she has a Michael Jackson poster also. It's just, there's a lot of
Michael Jackson waiter. And then even in the 3rd movie, he does the moonwalk. So there's a lot of Michael Jackson. It's really
and you wonder if that also ties in to the huge connections to Pepsi in the movie too.
Well, there you go. There you go. I mean, Mike and Pepsi are synonymous with one another. It's like the glove.
Exactly. So yeah, that could be something.
Well, I've always argued that 2 is iconic. When you think of the iconography of Back to the Future, obviously you think of the DeLorean. But then what do you think of? You think of the hoverboard. You think of the Air Mags. You think of the Pepsi Perfect. Those things are what come to mind, and those are all from Back to the Future too.
There's 100%. Like the hoverboard is right behind it. I mean, the DeLorean's number 1, of course, but the hoverboard second. And the hoverboard stayed this mythological thing forever. It's still annoying that every version of something called a hoverboard is not the hoverboard.
Right.
And like even recently, I'm sure you saw the thing on social media. The guy was obsessed with Back to the Future, so he did the scene. He reenacted the scene on a hoverboard, but like, it's never done right. It's still never satisfied that feeling we all want of seeing an actual hoverboard. And I always make the joke that when I was a kid, so 2 came out in 89.
Yeah,
I was 10 years old, and so like that was the kind of thing that kids would be like, "Yo, my cousin has one. Like my cousin has a hoverboard." Like that was a regular thing in life at that point. Like, no, I'm gonna go see it this weekend. I didn't use it yet, but I'm going to. Like that was totally happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And but to go to your thing on 3. So when I was a kid, 3 was my favorite, and I think for a couple reasons. One, I'm from Texas, and obviously I grew up on westerns, so I identify with that western vibe. But when I started to think about it when I was older, like why did I like 3 so much? I think it's actually most like the first movie because you have Doc and Marty stuck in the past with no clear way to get back to the future, and they're having to figure out some backdoor plan B way. You know, in the first movie it was, we can harness lightning. In this one, you rip a fuel line, maybe we can push the DeLorean with a train. You know, but we got to figure it, and we only got one shot at it. And it builds that inherent drama that really propels the entire film.
That's an interesting thing I didn't even think about. That's totally true. It does occupy a similar space in that way. It's just like there's a darkness to 2.
There is.
That's so interesting, you know? And then obviously with the current president, you know, and honestly, I felt like back in the day when Obama roasted Trump at the White House Correspondents' Dinner and he showed what the White House would look like, I felt like that was a straight play on Biff Tannen.
Yeah.
I really did.
Well, Bob Gale, who co-wrote the movie, said that he based that version of Biff back in the day on Trump. So, I mean, it still plays to this day. But 2 is so dark. But you bring up Biff. Where do you think Biff Tannen ranks as far as greatest movie villains of all time? Because I think that he doesn't get enough credit in that convo. We always talk about Vader. You talk about guys like that, right? But Biff Tannen, especially in the first movie, is a force. This guy's a force, and he doesn't get it. And then Tom Wilson, I think I counted up, it was 7 or 8 different variations of the Biff character that he plays. So not only a great acting performance, but bringing that villain to life, he's got to be a top 3, top 4 villain.
It's a great point. There's minimum 5. There's minimum 5 that I remember right away.
Okay, who you got?
Well, you have in one. You have adult 40-something-year-old
Oh,
Biff
yeah.
and teenage Biff.
Mm-hmm.
The second one, you have old man Biff.
You have his grandson Griff, and then
Griff. You have Western Biff.
Western Biff, and then the other variations are you have Biff Horrific, where he takes over the world, right? In alternate 85, and really at the end of the first movie, it's a different Biff. He's now the subservient caretaker for George. So there's all these like little different variations,
which is just so good. Like the idea of the bully becoming subservient at the end and being like, "Your book's here." Like it's not even like he's not just helping him; he's invested.
Right. He's like a friend now. He's like,
yeah.
Now Biff, don't you swindle me. 2 coats of wax, Biff. Who? Speaking of that, aside from Marty and Doc, which, 2 iconic characters, obviously, Marty McFly. I think I always wanted to be Marty McFly when I was a kid, as everyone did. And then when you get older, you're like, man, Doc's so awesome. But aside from those 2, who's like your favorite side character in the movie? Is it Biff, or is it someone even lower than that? Is it someone like Mayor Goldie Wilson? Who's someone that you just love whenever you see that movie?
Original Jennifer.
Claudia Wells, yes.
Original Jennifer is so the 80s adorable girlfriend that as a kid, even though I didn't see it in 85, I guess I probably saw it in 87 or something.
Yeah. As
an 8, 9, 10-year-old, her and Sloane from Ferris Bueller's Day Off were just like you're a 10-year-old, so a 16-year-old girl, or the portrayal of a 16-year-old girl, is this like fantasy woman, I love Original Jennifer. I think their relationship's so great, although it's so funny to me. 2 things are funny about that relationship. Well, number one, when he's like, she's crazy about me, and he pulls out the note with her number on it that says, "Call me with a heart."
Yeah,
that's all it says.
It says,
right?
"I love you."
It's like, it says "love you."
Yeah.
It says "love you" on a note with a phone number. It's like, I love that's the evidence that she's so crazy about it. But
what I actually love in that moment too, though, that I've never even discussed or talked about, I just love how Doc, whenever he says, "I got a girl, man, she's crazy about me," he goes, "Is she pretty?" Like, what does that have to do with anything?
He just wants to know. Like, this adds a sense of urgency. If she was a dog, Doc wouldn't even care about getting you back. But one thing about regular 1985 Marty that I think is, and I'm sure you've thought about this, is Marty the character too cool to be bullied by both the vice principal and is it vice principal or principal?
Principal.
To be bullied by both his principal and then to turn around and he's kind of instantly falls into the Biff bully thing. But that of course makes more sense. Biff's terrifying. But the role that he plays being so, I don't know, he's this mix of cool, but I guess that's supposed to be the weakness of George McFly that's in him because of who George turned out to be.
Right. I mean, he even says, well, you're right. He's cool and a loser at the same time, right? Obviously, he's kind of a slacker. When he gets to school, he's always late. He's not focused on it. And then his true passion's this music, and he gets 10 seconds into his song, and Huey Lewis juts him off and says, "You're too darn loud." And he fails at that. But I think that it was the implantation of George McFly's fear of rejection inside Marty to where he doesn't even feel like I need to try to excel, because if I do, I can then fail, and then I can't take that kind of rejection.
I can't take it. I guess the line, "I just don't think I can take that kind of rejection," is really what sums up the loser part of him.
Yeah.
But you could also argue that that sort of loserish part of him is why he has the relationship with Doc in the first place. Now, maybe it's just the fact that he's a sweet kid and wants to help out an old, wacky scientist. But yeah, the relationship there and him being caught being late for school, and being cut immediately and kind of being so scared and not thinking his band could make it. But that is the George McFly part. So it's essential. And again, speaks to what makes the movie perfect, because it shows the flaws that are there all because his dad wasn't willing to be brave. Yeah. And I believe that stuff. I mean, that stuff gets passed down. There's no way around it. I mean, you might be the exact opposite of your parents. You might be the exact same as your parents, but you are because of your parents. So it really ends up just tying it up and making it perfect.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it on the head there. Now, I know that we're gonna have to wrap this up soon, but I have one more question for you. So I became a fan of Peter Rosenberg through your work at Hot 97, and it continued to listen to you with your wrestling podcast, Cheap Heat, of course, your ESPN podcast, Cheap Heat. So this is what I want to ask you. This is gonna be tough. I'm putting you on the spot. I want you to recast Marty and Doc, but Marty's got to be a rapper, and Doc has to be a wrestler. Who would you cast as Marty? And who would you cast as Doc?
Marty as a rapper. I mean, man, it requires like this mix of like cool, confident, but with a little bit of vulnerability. But then there's also, you can get caught up thinking who would just be cool. Like if they were going to redo the film, who would just be cool? And by the way, I want to ask you when I'm done answering this, how you are going to react when they invariably redo this film.
I have an answer for it, but go ahead.
I'm sure you've thought about that and talked about it. For some reason, just because of the coolness of his brand and how well it would be marketed, but I don't want this. And it's not a diss to him either, because I love him. But the person that people would throw out there would be like Travis Scott. Like because of the cool Nike branding, but that's not it.
Houston guy. You know the first one when I was thinking about it, when I was going to ask you this, I was thinking about it myself. Donald Glover comes to mind, right? Childish Gambino. Even though he's more on the actor tip already, I feel like he could pull it off.
Well, the thing is, that's sort of a cheat code answer, because yes, he would be great because he is the mix of cool and a nerd. But the cheat code in it is, of course, he can act.
Right, he's already an actor.
He can really do it.
He was Lando.
He could act. Right, he could actually do it. And Doc, I mean, it's got to be J.J. Dillon.
Oh, great call. Great call.
I think it's J.J. Dillon. I don't know about the hair, but yeah, I don't know. He's who popped into my head right away. Wily, old, silver-haired guy.
Could we see like old man Macho, like Macho Man with white hair, overreact? Oh, you great Scott Morty, like the whole nine.
Well, you're talking about the old Macho Man, so he would have been yelling "Be a man, Hogan" as he did it. The Hogan dissing rapping savage is what you're talking about.
Yeah, and then they could do the track together. Him and Travis Scott, they do the title track. They remix "Power of Love." I like how this is going.
Now, and I want one more thing I think is important to note, and I'm sure you spent time on it. It's maybe the best scored movie of all time.
Yes. The Sylvester was not only the best scored, but the best score married with a great soundtrack from Huey Lewis and the News. Those two songs, "Power of Love" and "Back in Time."
Well, and that was the second point I wanted to say was was "Back in Time" does not get enough credit.
No, it doesn't.
I love "Back in Time." Okay, "Power of Love" is a top 30 song for me probably in life. But "Back in Time" is great. It is, and it frustrates me, and I'll show you why. And this is just to pop you, but why not? And that's the point. I don't know if this audio. I mean, no, the audio
it's good.
work.
It sounds good.
This.
Yeah.
It'll pop you more visually, but hold on.
So this looks like a jukebox that you have, which is awesome. And do you? Oh no. So we have Peter Rosenberg going through his jukebox, and it looks like it's searching for a particular number. Looks like he's got it stocked with 45s here. Uh-oh, we have an option.
And so what bothers me is the killer part here is you can't see it, but that the B-side is a song called Bad is Bad by Huey Lewis. And it's like, why is the B-side not back in time?
It makes no sense. The B-side wasn't back in time?
No.
What?
It drives me insane because I never play the B-side, and all I want is for it to be back in time. But I have the album, you can play it off the album, but there's no 45.
Well, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Talk to someone about this if you can.
Well, yeah, I will put it through the proper channels. But to answer your question about if they remake the movie, I've thought about it a million times. I am not like actively rooting for it, but I'm not against it either. So like when they had that all-female Ghostbusters come out a couple years ago, I was hyped because I'm a big Ghostbusters fan. So I went to go see it. I didn't like it. I didn't think that it hit. It didn't connect with me. It didn't feel like a Ghostbusters film. So I decided I'm never going to watch it again. But I thought maybe that's going to tarnish the other movies for me. So then I went and watched Ghostbusters 1 and 2, and I still love them just as much. So if they make a new Back to the Future movie and I hate it, well, I never have to watch it again, and I still have my original 3. But this is what I've thought about. If they make another one and it's awesome, I just got more Back to the Future in my life. Like, that's not a bad thing. That's only a positive attribute.
How old is Zemeckis?
Zemeckis is pushing 70. He's latter 60s.
I just wish if they decided to do it while he's around and like let his voice be part of it. Now, maybe part of the thing is you want to have a different director to have their vision of it, but I would love the idea of recasting it. Maybe you do have a new director, but with him as a legitimate consultant on the film. But I'm very into the idea of movies like this being recast with people of color. I just feel that like it could, and I have some other movies that I'll tell you offline that I really would want to try to make happen, that I think if they were recast with young Black kids would not only change the film, but expose it to such a broader and new audience. And I think there are movies where it would seem silly just to do it again because we don't need it. And Back to the Future may be in that category because it's perfect and because most everyone in the world has seen it.
Yeah.
Regardless of background. But there's no doubt that as big as it was in our lives, I would still venture to say as crossover as it was everywhere, I'm sure it was still bigger in white households than it was Black. And so there would be something cool about the audience you could reach with a new casting of it for kids. Because I mean, yes, some kids are going to get put onto it by their parents, but if their parents weren't huge fans, they may not get put onto it.
One of the names on the call sheet for Doc Brown back in 1985 was Eddie Murphy. They considered Eddie Murphy for Doc Brown back in the day. Now think about crazy take then, but think about Eddie Murphy now as Doc Brown in a recast Back to the Future movie. I think that he would crush it, especially his work in Dolomite. I think he'd be great.
Wow, that's a great call. Especially now that he's getting he finally looks older than 45.
Right.
I think he's Eddie's pushing 60.
I think he is 60.
60 on the dot, maybe.
Yeah.
So so now that he looks like 48, it's doable. And it's funny when you realize it, when you look at how old was Christopher Lloyd when they made the first one? 45?
Yeah, I think he was probably about, let's see, he's in his 80s now. So yeah, he would have been later 40s, maybe early 50s.
So that's a great call. I would love Eddie Murphy as Doc. And by the way, in 85, even if they went out to him, I mean, especially if from the beginning, it's like, hey, we have Eric Stoltz, and Eddie Murphy in 85 might say no. I mean, this is between Delirious and Raw. He's like completely on fire. He might have thought like, this movie sounds corny.
Yeah, I think 48 Hours might have been out, what, in 84, right? Or 80,
yeah, he's
83?
hot. He's already
yeah.
scorching hot. So it's not a guarantee he does it then. Now, especially since like he loves doing his kids' movies here and there, but here you get to be a part of a classic and reinvent it for people. I love that idea. That's awesome.
Yeah, that'd be top. But I do like your idea of although I do think that you're right about Back to the Future still reaching, the original one reaching like all neighborhoods, because you think about Marty McFly and how many times you've heard either DeLorean, Marty McFly, or some variety of that in hip hop records. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is Kanye, Good Morning, and look at the future, look at the valedictorian, scared of the future while I hop in the DeLorean, right? Or you think of, I think Rocky Fresh had like a whole run. Driving 88 was like the name of his album or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but there's been a lot throughout, the annals of hip hop. But if you had somebody iconic like Eddie, think about how the culture would embrace that. Oh my goodness.
God. Eddie as Doc Brown would be, it might reshape the movie to a degree where it's marketed more around Doc, unless, of course, you come with the just amazing Marty. I could see Jaden Smith getting thrown in that conversation.
Yeah. I think you have to go unknown. I think you have to go unknown with Marty, right?
It's and by the way, how famous was Michael J. Fox when the movie was made?
I mean, Family Ties was #1 in the country. It was the number one.
It'd only been like 2-3 years.
Yeah. So he was Alex P. Keaton, #1 show, Family Ties. So I mean, he was well known. He was well known. He might have been the most popular Canadian in America at the time.
Right.
Which is always a good barometer.
Wasn't John Candy Canadian?
Yes.
I think he was. There were some Canadians around at that time.
Yeah.
But anyways, an unknown is an interesting idea. Or like, a musician who's not necessarily thought of for acting, who all of a sudden it's like, whoa, he's in a movie. He's Marty McFly. Hold up.
Yeah.
And you know what? You make a good point though, because like the gut reaction is to be like, oh, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. But who cares if they do it? It could be fun. What if it's awesome? What if it's amazing? And it just makes people relive the other ones. So I'd be open to it.
It was like Creed. When Creed came out, everyone's like, do we need another Rocky movie? I was like, well, it's a reimagining, of a Rocky movie. It's a continuation, and it was awesome. Like it was great.
People loved it.
Yeah, so you just keep it moving. Well, Pete, I appreciate you for taking the time to talk Back to the Future. I'm glad
it's the only podcast I think I've ever asked to be on.
Well, that's good. I'll take that, and hopefully we'll have you back in the next season. And congratulations to you and all your success, man. We'll be listening to Hot 97 ESPN. But any plugs? Do you have any plugs? Do you want to plug?
No. Listen to the GP podcast. And yeah, sure, we're doing a good job. Hot 97 in the morning. Ebro in the morning every day is in this interesting time we're living in. It's required listening. We talk about a lot of important stuff every day and have fun. It's a rare balance. So I'm having a good time with that. And no, not really. And by the way, congrats on the book and the podcast. And you had Leah Thompson the day the book came out. Oh. And then she like marks out for the fact that you have the book. It had to be one of the great moments of your life.
Check this out. I don't know if you can hear this. Hold on. Tell me if you can hear this.
Oh my God, you're my dreamboat for sure.
Did you hear that?
It's a drop. You have a drop from it now.
For sure. Oh, and here's the better drop. You want to hear the better drop? Can I get a Great Scott?
Great Scott!
Oh, so fantastic. Legendary.
Wow.
Legendary.
You are doing things, man. Listen, really, I'm proud of you. You're doing a great job, man. I was talking to Booker about you the other day at the pay-per-view, and he was just going on about how proud he is of everything you're doing. So keep doing your thing, bud.
That's great to hear. That is the one and only Peter Rosenberg. Back to the Future of the podcast. Thanks, Pete.
Later, bud.
And there he was, Peter Rosenberg. Really enjoyed that conversation with him. And I tell you, as the days continue on, I really am getting married to this idea of Eddie Murphy as a potential Doc Brown. I don't know. I just like the idea. We're going to be back next week with another edition of Back to the Future, the podcast. Hope you enjoyed this one. I have several in the can. We're going to be rocking all the way into 2021, trust me, with a lot of incredible episodes. But until then, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Brad Gilmore. Go get my book, Back from the Future, a celebration of the greatest time travel story ever told, available wherever books are sold. And make sure you check me out again on social media. But until next time, I'm your friend in time, Brad Gilmore, and I will see you in the future.